So my name is Kyle Houchins. This is Getting Started Rhino for Mac. We're using V6 today. I am set up on the Windows theme. If my window looks different than yours, that is why. And the way that we modify that is here in Themes. I'm running with the Rhino for Windows theme. There's a Rhino for Mac, Rhino for Windows, and a custom. You're welcome to choose whichever one of those you want, but I'm going to be using the Windows ones because it's got the tabs up here that I like. So, um, awesome. We've got Mexico, Italy, France, all over the place. That's really cool. Thank you for joining. So today, a little background on the getting started is if you're not a frequent flyer for these videos, the way that these work is I basically sketch something either the night before or in today's case, the morning of, and something I've never built before. And the idea is that I put myself in the same position that you are in when somebody hands you a sketch and says, build this, or whether you do a sketch yourself and you decide to build it for yourself. So they're unrehearsed. Like I said, I've never built this before. And the idea is to basically go on this journey together. If I find something that doesn't work, or I make a mistake, or Rhino has a problem, we're going to talk about it and we're going to figure out what went wrong, figure out how to fix it, and talk about how to get out of that, which I found with all the hundreds of webinars I've watched in the past was always the thing that was most frustrating, is when somebody turned on a layer and said, and it's done. And I can't stand that. I want to see how you got there. I want to see what happened. I want to see, if anything broke, no lying, cheating, or stealing. We're going to show you exactly how this goes from clean sheet to production. So, as with just about all of the models that I build, I either start with a little sketch, which is basically just a conversation with myself. I usually don't show anybody the sketches because we're going to show them a 3D model, right? And the idea is to get a gesture or a little zygote of an idea and get it on the screen and then forget about it, right? We want to make all of our decisions in 3D, and we want to design in 3D. We don't want to just be modelers, right? There's all sorts of modelers out there. There's people who are way better technical modelers than I am, um, and so you guys are all like, where are those webinars? They're out there if you look for them. But my goal is basically to take just the very basics of an idea and get it on the screen so that I can start making my decisions in 3D, right? So this is just a side view sketch, right? And side view sketches, as we all know, are you can lie, cheat, and steal like crazy on these things and make a sketch look great, whereas it's something that can't be modeled, right? So the idea is to get this up here, just give myself some kind of references and some forums and some things to kind of aim for, but ultimately what I'm going to be doing is making my decisions in 3D, right? Because that's where the actual reality, the design, and all that stuff is going to happen in 3D. So we want to focus on that as opposed to trying to focus on hitting the sketch. So I've had people watch these videos in the past and be like, well, you've deviated from the art quite significantly. And I'm like, yeah, that's the point, because the art sucked to start with. And, the idea is for the model to take, the suck out of success. we want it to be something that's going to be, the model is what we care about, not necessarily the sketch, because I can't hold the sketch in my hand. All right, so with that said, I've got the sketch in place. I'm not even going to bother scaling it at this point because this is just a demo, but if I did want to scale it, what I would do is I would just click a line and I'd make a line a certain number of units. If I knew this was 10 units tall, I would make a 10 unit tall line and then just scale the image to the line, right? But I'm not even going to worry about that because we're not going to get that deep into these. But the cool thing about using the picture command is it is just a regular object, right? It's just an image mapped onto a surface, and that surface can be scaled, it can be rotated, it can be copied, it can be anything that you can do with a surface, you can do with a picture, right? So that's the one cool thing about pictures that we have over like background bitmap or something like that. Okay, so the next thing that we want to talk about is if I were to start trying to draw over this, right? My sketch becomes a little bit prohibitive because my line work disappears and I can't see where it's going, right? So I need to drop the opacity of this sketch. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just throw it on a layer. I'm going to call this my image layer. And I'm going to pick this and I'm going to right click over here and I'm going to say move object to this layer. And that gives me the ability to be able to turn it on, turn it off, lock it, do whatever I need to do to it from a a management, model management point of view and all that kind of stuff. So the next thing I want to do is I want to see where my materials are, and I want to, let's go over here and let's see materials. And if I pick this image, what it's going to do after it gets done thinking, I'm on a pretty old MacBook Pro here, by the way. So this is like a 6-year-old MacBook Pro. But if I pick this, you'll see that the material is already listed. It's got the name of whatever the picture was. And then down here to object transparency, I'm just going to raise this and make it more transparent. And then what that's going to do is drop the opacity of this image, and it's going to make it much easier for me to be able to see my line work and stuff like that. So if I go back here to my layer stack and I grab my image, and let's go to perspective view. So I want to make one more change to this. I almost always grab my images and I pull them back out of the modeling envelope. And the reason that I do that is because I don't like this. I don't like, if I'm modeling something that's symmetrical, I don't like this where the image is, contained inside the object. So if I grab this and I just drag it back out of the scene so that it's here, I can still see what's going on. I can still see, some reference where I'm working on my model in this area, but it doesn't bisect it and make it difficult to see. So I'm going to go ahead and lock this now. Now this image is locked into the scene. If I go to my front view, I can still see it. And I actually may move it over. I think I'm going to center off of this gauge just so I can have a reference of something to kind of work off of. So I'm just going to center it. Just going to use kind of the center of that gauge as the center of the object. And I could put this up and sit it down on the origin if I wanted to, but it doesn't really matter because we can always deal with that later. So let's go ahead and lock that now. And let's talk a little bit about like pre-flight kind of thinking about how we do this, right? So the main body here is a fairly revolvable form. Even the whole thing, even the cap down here, we can get away with. Obviously, we've got some detailing in the body here that we're going to have to deal with later, but I can basically revolve this entire profile and get a really large chunk of the model done right off the bat. The gauge is obviously going to be revolved, or it's going to be an extruded cylinder or something to that effect. This nozzle is obviously going to be a revolved object as well. And then I've got some hard shapes up here that I could probably get away with just making an outline of the shape and extruding it. So we've got a pretty basic roadmap here of this object, and then we've got some opportunities for detailing along the way that we're going to talk about, some cool tricks to be able to kind of pull off this stuff. And so even though the model itself seems like it has, if you're a beginning modeler, has some kind of daunting aspects to it where you're like, well, what's all going on up here and what's happening behind here and all this kind of stuff. We're going to kind of find the way along the way, but the positive part of this is that we can get a long way before we have to start thinking about whether or not where we actually have to start figuring out what's happening. So let's start with the easy stuff, right? Let's go with the big easy stuff, which is this main form here. And I'm going to start at the bottom because that's going to give me a reference, because I can start right at the origin. And I'm going to start with just roughing this out using a single curve. And I'm going to just shift drag out like this. And I'm going to come up here like this. And I'm not even going to worry about the fillets or anything at this point. I'm just going to draw that as, you know, kind of a hard shape. Now this obviously is a spline, so I'm going to go ahead and draw that as such. And I'm going to pull out here. This is a little inset step in here, so I need to build. I either need to build inside, knowing that I'm going to go out, or I need to build outside knowing that I'm going to go in. But this junction down here, right, is you know, these have positional continuity at this point right here. So I'm going to start out and go in, which means I need to kind of figure out, I'm going to kind of predict where this thing would have been had I drawn it full scale, right? And the shape is a little stinky, so let's go fix that. And I'm just going to do that with gumball. Get it a little closer to what I was looking for. I usually don't sweat my curves too much. I usually try and get my points to be something close to what I was looking for, and then I worry about the actual, you know, the actual shape of them a little later. And I think that I'm just going to use some nudge and get that. Maybe that's still a little fat. So let's pull that down a little bit. All right, so that gives us about what we're looking for. We can always refine later if we find we've got something else going on that we don't like. So I'm going to snap to here using those snaps. Come up, step in, holding shift. And then there's a lot of gray area back here. So I'm going to assume that there's just, you know, some sort of thing going on back here. And so we'll go ahead and just put kind of some placeholder geometry in here. I've got a little indication of something going on back here, but I'm assuming that this is like something that screws into the top of that. So I'm going to give myself an opportunity to have kind of a revolved feature back there that I'll build off of at a later date. All right, so we've got our basic shape here, and let's go ahead and just join all of this up so that it makes a full profile here. And the top is going to be open because I didn't bring this line back to the origin, but that's okay. I'm kind of okay with that. So let's just go ahead and revolve this, and we'll get a long way towards getting this model started. I'm going to start at the origin, and then if I look at the command line over here, it says press enter to use the C-plane Z-axis. And if I look at my triad, the Z-axis is up and down, which is exactly what I want. So I'm just going to hit enter, and then for full circle, see how this is underlined in the button? That means if I just type U enter, it's going to go ahead and accept that as an input. So that keeps you from having to like mouse all the way over and pick that button and then go from there, right? So those little interface tricks. Anytime you see a letter underlined in a command line, that means you can type it into the command line and get it essentially for free without having to go over there and type it. So let's draw the other easy revolved shapes, which is kind of this trumpet shape out here, and then maybe these guys. Let's go ahead and do that because that's going to be super easy. And I'm going to draw that with straight lines, and I'm going to just start holding shift, come out here, shift, and I'm actually going to just draw this as a square because I'm going to fix it later. And then I'm going to use my O snap, and I'm going to light this guy up and find my center. Now this needs to be open, so this actually isn't accurate the way that this is going to go, but I think I'm going to model it like this. Actually, no, let's draw it correctly. Let's draw it right to start with. So let's go ahead and finish that out. Let's add our wall thickness in here, and I'm going to just draw it over like that, and then I'm going to come down, and then that's going to trim a hole in it like that. So let's go ahead and do this, and I'm going to use a feature called Curve Boolean. If you haven't seen this before, this is one of my favorite tools. And what it allows you to do is take some curves. I'm going to delete the inputs all, and we're going to combine the regions. If I grab these and just click outside of it, you can see that it just trims everything off around it. And this isn't a super impressive example of the power of curved Boolean. I usually use like a gear. And so if we do something like this, and I were to draw this, and I were to make a gear, and let's do like, I don't know, 20 of these, right? If I had to go and trim this, that would be a pain because I'd have to trim all of this and I'd have to go click, 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 click. Who's got time for that, right? So if I do this instead and say curved Boolean, and I just click outside of this, one shot, I get all of that trim at one time. If you do text, I showed this to a vehicle interior design company who used to trace logos all the time. And you know, they would draw all sorts of curves and then have to go trim, 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 trim. It used to make them crazy. And I said, oh, just select all that stuff and curve Boolean on the outside. The guy's jaw just about bashed a hole through the table. He was like, oh my God, you just saved me hours and hours and hours of time. So curve Boolean is really cool if you have to do lots of complicated trims like that, which is super useful. All right, so we've got this thing drawn out and we need to make a decision. We can either revolve this as it is with its sharp corners and then model in the fillets and stuff later. Or if we know what we're doing to start with, it's probably not a terrible idea to draw in the fillets now and then just model them in implicitly. So let's go ahead and do that. And what I'm going to do is let's use blend curves because I like how they look better. We're going to use, I always have to go looking for this, adjustable curve blend. There we go. And I'm going to use the pick point, and let's just pick flip number 1. And then what we can do is we can drag these ends to get exactly the little blend that we want in here. And if I shift drag on these handles, they move at the same time. And I can design what this transition looks like. And then I can trim it and join it and say, okay. And looks like it trimmed the entire thing, which I didn't want. So let's try that again. Flip number 1. So let's see if it trims the whole thing again. And it did, which I don't like. So let's try it one more time and let's do it without the trim and then we'll do the trims later. So let's just design this the way that we want. Say, okay, I'm not going to trim it. And then let's design the rest of this. And I'm going to blend from here to here, flipping number 1. And let's pull this down like that. And then let's shift drag on these handles and get that. And then let's do the same thing here. Flip number 1. I want this to be a little tighter, so let's pull these closer, and then we'll shift drag on these handles. And then you can just drag on a single handle if you want it to be kind of an asymmetrical shape. So that looks pretty good. And then let's go down here and do the same thing just on these two ends. Flip number 1. I'm okay with that. Now, the difference between this and fillet is this is actually a tangent blend based on continuity versus a fillet, which is just a circular blend in there that just fits an arc into that corner. I actually like the way that blends look better than I do if we were to blend. Now, to mitigate that trim issue that I had, I'm just going to explode this curve, and then I'm just going to go ahead and trim each curve individually. And I could probably get away with doing curve Boolean on this. But what's the fun in that? I already showed you that. Just right-clicking to re-invoke the last command. Don't need this one anymore. You can also just hit spacebar to get that. So we've drawn this whole thing out, and I think that looks pretty good. So let's join it. And then let's revolve. I'm just going to type revolve because it's super easy to do. I know what the command is, and I'm just going to roll with it. And then I'm going to hit U enter for full circle, and that's going to give me my trumpet. Now, I need to make a decision here, right? Because I've varied from my artwork fairly significantly. You can see that this thing is fairly skinny, whereas this is fairly fat, and I have to make a decision. Is my drawing crappy, and this is actually what it should look like, or did I miss on my modeling, and this is actually what it's supposed to look like, which is the sketch. Now, the cool thing is because we have history, I can either iterate with this, and I actually didn't do this with history, so let's try it again. Let's do it with history. Turn that on, and let's revolve again. You enter. Now that I have history on, if I take this curve and move it, you can see that the object is gonna move. So then I have to say, okay, well, the top of this looks right, but the bottom doesn't look right, which means this is probably too big, right? So if I move this down like that and say, get it to about what the right profile was, which is a little bit skinnier, that's probably a little closer, but then this doesn't match back here. So then, this is where you have to say, okay, now I'm designing in 3D. What does it actually look like? This feels way too skinny to me. So I'm going to actually pull this back up to here, and I'm going to say that I probably didn't draw this symmetrically. And I probably, actually, I'm going to cheat it again a little bit closer like that. And then I'm going to pull the entire model up after I'm done. So let's take the curve and move this down. And because I did this, you can see that it actually has self-intersected. So let's turn our points on, and let's just move this up and get our hole back. I'm just going to stack these points up a little bit. See how that opens this back up at the back? So that allows me to be able to kind of iterate in here and then decide what I want. Now that I've got it the way I want, I can just move the actual model itself. It's going to say you broke the history. I'm going to say, okay, that's fine. And I'm going to delete it. And then I can see I'm much closer, right? This aspect is correct. I feel good about this angle up here. And it looks like I just bungled the symmetry on the sketch. And I'm going to say that that's probably what the intent should be as opposed to following the sketch. So that's what I was talking about earlier, where it's like you have to design the thing in 3D and make sure that it looks good as opposed to being a slave to the sketch, right? That's the difference between being a designer using a modeling tool and being a modeler where you hand them a sketch and say, make this exactly like the sketch. All right, so let's look at the additional details on here. It looks like it's got these little fin details on it, so let's draw those. And I'm going to just make those very simply with a profile, very simple profile. And then I'm going to just type close, and that's going to close this curve. There we go, close curve. Got to use the right command. Close curve, and it just shoots a piece in there and makes it closed. And then let's go to the top view, and let's go to shaded view so we can see what's going on. And we'll grab our curve, and let's extrude it, but let's hold down the Shift key so that it extrudes in both directions. And that's our little detail. And because it was a curve, it extruded into a surface. All we have to do to close it off is just use the cap command. And then we've got our detail. Now, I may want to address the sharpness of these edges now, or I may want to do that later. I think for right now, I am going to actually knock the edges off of this because I'm going to revolve this and make a bunch of copies of it. And if I do it now, I only have to fill it once or blend it once, as opposed to having to go back and do all that. So I'm thinking down the road a little bit, like what's going to happen to this part. and what am I going to do? So I'm going to just go ahead and select these two edges. I don't exactly know what my size on this thing is going to be, but let's go ahead and take a look at it. And it looks like these are all way too big, so I'm going to set all, and I'm going to just set this to like 0.1 and see how that looks. It's still too big, so let's go 0.01. That's more what I was looking for, and I can preview it to see if I like what I got, and it looks like it's still too big, so I'm going to set all and do 0.005. Let's go half of what we had before, and it'll preview again, and I feel a lot better about that as a size. So I'll go ahead and accept it, and then now I can take this thing and let's isolate just that part. We'll go to the front view, actually go to the right hand view, and let's do a polar array on this thing. So let's do transform array polar. We're gonna use an O snap to find the center of this, and then let's do, I don't know, like 7. See what that looks like. And from preview, we can take a look and see, and I think that that's gonna work. I think that's gonna work fine. So let's go ahead and just run with that. And that looks pretty good. And it looks like, for some reason, we got more than one curve there. So let's undo it, and let's just pick that, and let's run it again. I think I grabbed the original curve that I used to make the trumpet. You guys are like, wow, these really aren't rehearsed. Nope. Completely making it up as I go along. All right, so that looks pretty cool. And then we have to decide, like, do we like how this relationship is? Like, because we did it with history, if I move this down, they all drop in a little bit. If I move them up, they get taller, right? If I rotate, I can change the aspect ratio of how these things, you know, it's bigger in the front, smaller in the back. I kind of like that. Looks like the drawing had them fairly linear, but if I'm looking at this and rotating around it, these feel a little heavy to me, so I think I'm going to drop them in and make them a little less pronounced, because I feel like that is a little bit better version of that, like that. Maybe not quite that far. Maybe I'll bring it up just a hair. It's poking through, and I can always deal with that later, but I might make them just a little bit taller. That works. So I'm going to go ahead. I usually don't do it this early, but I'm going to go ahead and Boolean these together because I feel like I'm fairly confident that I'm going to get what I want out of this. And so we're going to call that finished part, right? So let's show everything. Take a look at the front, and we've got a big chunk of our model already done. So let's go with the other easy stuff, which is the gauge in here. And I'm going to do this a little bit differently. I could revolve the whole thing at one shot, and maybe that's not the dumbest idea. Yeah, why not? Let's draw it first, get a reference like that, and shift drag, just make it just a hair bigger. And I'm going to isolate. Isolate gets rid of everything except what you're picking on. So if you pick something and hit isolate, you're gonna isolate just that object, and then all you have to do to bring everything back is show. You could use layers to do that. You could throw everything on layers and turn them on and off, but isolate's really quick, and I find that it's pretty useful. I'm gonna copy paste, and I'm gonna shift drag to make that just a little bit smaller. And the other thing that I want to point out, I haven't saved this yet. So see how it still says untitled? Let's go ahead and save this. And Rhino's the first time you save it is gonna ask you to save the thing. So let's call it FireX, and I'm gonna just put it on the desktop and say save. Now once I save it and it has a name, then the automatic saving mechanism, time machine, all that stuff starts kicking in. By the way, if you have a Mac and you aren't using Time Machine, which is up here, right? Pause for a second, take your fist, ball it up really tight, and punch yourself in the face. Okay? I'll wait. If you aren't using Time Machine, it's built into the Mac, it's built into versions, all of that stuff works together. Set it up right now. I can't tell you how many times I've had students call me on tech and say, my model's gone. And I said, are you using Time Machine? And they say, what's Time Machine? And I say, ball your fist up, take it, punch yourself in the face. It's like the most elegant built-in backup system you could possibly imagine. It takes like 2 seconds to set up. It should be the first thing that you do after you turn the Mac on when you take it out of the package after you've bought it. But make sure that you're using it, because between Rhino autosave, the way that Rhino saves things as you're going in versions, and then Time Machine, your files will be safe, right? If you don't have that set up, there's nothing you can do about it. You know, if something happens, if it crashes or something like that, then, you know, it's the chances are of your stuff being gone is pretty good. So don't do that. Set up Time Machine. Set it up right now. We'll wait. No, we won't. But set up Time Machine anyways. All right. I was going to revolve this, but I think I'm going to go a different direction. I think I'm going to just draw this out and model it up the way that I want it to be. And I'm going to use the blend surface to blend these two together to get my bezel, because it makes a really nice bezel. And then I'm going to put a planar cap on this. Actually, I'm just going to cap this internal surface because I can always explode it. And you see it screwed up my history, so I'm going to undo that. I have a hotkey set up for killing history, and if you don't have it up, the command is history purge, and that will kill all the history on anything that you have that is not set up already. Now if I run the cap command, it does it without killing the history. I can get rid of this one because I'm going to do something else on the back. In fact, I may actually scale this in one direction and bring it in a little bit to make the inside of that gauge. And then this is going to have glass on it. So let's get all of this. Let's slide this in a little bit like that. And then the glass is, we can either revolve it, we can use a sphere, we can do, you know, anything like that. I think I'm going to just revolve it. And the way that I'm going to do it is I'm going to start with a polyline. I'm going to just snap it to a quad, and then bring it to the other quad. And then I'm going to change degree on this curve, because this curve only has 2 points because it's a straight line. So if I change degree on this and make it a degree 3, when I turn the points on, now it's got 4 points. And it's easy for me to pull it out and get whatever shape I want on that glass, right? So that's one of my favorite tricks, because straight lines are super easy to place, right? You only pick the first point and the last point. And then if you just change the degree from degree, 1 to degree 3, you get the same curve but with 4 points, right? And it allows you to be able to edit it and stuff like that. So let's go to the front view. I'm going to split this curve right down the middle, and I'm going to split it using a point. And I'm going to just gumball snap. I'm going to O snap to a quad, and that's going to split the curve. Should have split the curve in two pieces, but it didn't. Let's find out why. There we go. So I've got half a curve now. I can revolve this. Starting from here, going in this direction, you enter. There's my glass. Now, if I hide this, you see I have a gap between the inside between this and this out here. So I'm probably going to get rid of this. Just Shift Command click to delete. And then I'm going to loft between here and here. Now, is that kind of a convoluted way to get there? Probably, but we're finding the way along the way, and that's kind of how these things work. So I'm going to grab this all and join it for now. I'm going to cap it to get my back on this. So now this is a solid object, and then I'm going to show everything. And my glass is here. I'm going to drag, but I'm going to hold down Command, and I'm going to just add a little bit of thickness to that, because in order to get clear stuff to render correctly, you have to have a little bit of thickness on it. So I'm going to grab both of these and stick it out here in space, and then decide that seems way too thick. So I'm going to Shift Command click on the back of this thing. I'm going to just bring it in a lot closer, maybe even closer than that, something like that. Maybe that's too far. So that's my gauge. I'm going to stick it kind of right in here, and then these usually have some sort of taper on the back that screws into this. So let's go ahead and make that. So I'm going to Shift Command click. I'm going to start dragging, but I'm going to tap Alt, and you can see that the plus sign shows up. That allows me to copy this surface. I'm going to Shift drag. I'm going to stick it inside here. Shift Command click to get rid of this, and then let's either loft or blend or do whatever we want to do to get this edge and this edge connected. And I think I'm just going to blend. I think I'm just going to loft them. Grab everything and join, and that's our gauge. All right, so let's look at the head of this thing and see how we doing for time. Oh, 9:30, we're cruising. All right, so the head of this thing, I'm going to kind of make this up as I go along, because I don't really have the information I need to figure out what this thing is. So let's draw the handles first, and I'm going to just do these out of polylines to start with, because that's a nice easy way to go. And I'm going to assume the head kind of ends somewhere in there, somewhere like that, comes back in here like somewhere like there, comes up, and then we'll finish it off like that. And again, I drew this with polylines. If I explode these and then change degree, and I have a hotkey set up for change degree, and make this 3, then all of these curves, when I turn the points on, now have 2 evenly evenly spaced points along their length, which makes them super, super, super easy to edit. See how you can just really easily get very nice, even curves. This is a trick that I learned from my car days, where they always start with low degree curves, get them close, and then raise the degree to the point of what they need as far as surfacing is concerned. So let's go ahead and use blend curves so that we can start blending these things together. I always have to go looking for it on the PC. I don't know, or on the Mac. I don't know why. It's always easy to find on the Mac, on the PC, but I have to go looking for it. All right, so I'm going to flip number 1. Let's Shift drag, get our shape. I am going to go ahead and trim this. Do the same thing down here. Again, it looks like 2 needs to flip. And you can see how easy this is to do, right? This is easy. We can do this all day and get these shapes the way we want them. And then I don't like sharp edges, so I'm going to just replace that with a blend. I'm going to flip 2, drag that out to the end, drag that out to the end, and then Shift drag just to get the shape I need. And then I'll probably knock these corners off later. So let's go ahead and grab this whole thing and join it. And let's isolate. So this thing, we're going to just make life super easy. I'm going to just grab this, I'm going to extrude it, hold down Shift, and just extrude the whole thing and cap it. And that gives us kind of the basis for the head right there. And I'm even okay with that little shape right there. In fact, I may actually make this just a little thinner and pronounce that a little bit. That's kind of cool. Okay, again, making the decisions along the way. We want to design the thing so that it looks cool. All right. Let's go ahead and draft out the top part too. And it looks like there's some additional bits and pieces in here that we might want to add in. So let's pick at some of those. I'm going to pull an isoparam from this, which is a cool trick. If we come down here and say extract isocurve, I can drag a curve anywhere on this shape or on that surface and make a curve, and then I can just use gumball to extrude that piece. And I know it's centered. I know it's concentric to what I need to do. And then I'm going to take this, I'm going to copy paste, and I'm going to shift drag. See how much modeling I get to do with gumball? It's super convenient and super quick if you think about what you're doing. And we can start to match these shapes the way that they're supposed to be. And it looks like this could get a little bigger, so let's make that a little bigger. And we've got kind of the basis. Let's look and see what our art looks like underneath it. Got kind of the basics of what we've got going on. This thing may want to get bigger. Let's see. A little narrower. Stick it in a little bit. And then we can kind of look at it to see in 3D, like, what does this look like? Does it look terrible? Is our sketch led us astray? I'm kind of okay with that. In fact, we might even do something like this, where I shift command click on this edge and I shift drag on it to scale it down and add some taper to that. And then we get a little taper going on there, which is kind of cool. Let me pull that back a little bit. And I don't necessarily like the relationship of this element to this element. So let's grab all of this stuff and let's just cheat it up a little bit, because we can do that. So that feels a little more balanced to me. And it's sticking out on the side a little bit, so shift command click. I'm just going to shift drag and make it a little smaller. And that gives us something like that, which I like that. I think that's cool. So let's cap it. And then we'll figure out what the transitions and stuff are a little bit later, but I think we're getting our stuff roughed out. So let's draw the top handle, which obviously has to nest over all of this stuff. So again, I'm going to draw this with just straight lines. Kind of inferring where that shape is going to go. I'm going to leave that open because I know I'm going to put a blend on there anyway. So let's explode, change degree to 3, and then let's look at the points on all of this stuff. And then we can start making our adjustments. Like this one needs to just have a little bit of arc to it. This one, just these little subtleties can make a big difference on your forms. I was always taught, I went to Center for Creative Studies in Detroit and was a car designer, and I was always taught that straight lines, there's no such thing as a straight line on a car. It always has to be slightly positive in order to feel like it's not sagging or drooping on you. So let's grab all those curves, let's join them again. Let's grab this guy and isolate. Let's go to perspective, and I'm going to bring everything back for the time being. So I want to go to the top view, and I'm going to set this so that it sits outside of everything, because this has to kind of to nest over all this stuff. So I know that I want my object to be, actually I'm going to do this from the center, sorry. So let's scale this out with shift, but I'm going to scale it out so that it's out past the center. That way it's symmetrical. Otherwise I would have had to try and mirror it, loft it, or do something like that. So let's go like that. Let's cap it. Why didn't it cap? The reason it didn't cap is because it's not closed. Can't cap something that's not closed, so let's go ahead and cap it. Loft. Join. Yes, I know. Cap. And that's our object there. Then we can see, you know, kind of what's going on there. This face probably needs to go away. That face needs to go away. And I'm just shift command clicking. Shift command click, click. Out here, delete. That gives us our basic shell. And then let's go ahead and offset this now. I'm going to do a solid offset to get our wall thickness on this before we do any transition surfaces or anything like that. And I want to offset it in, so I'm going to flip that. And let's go something small like 0.1. Let's see. I'm guessing on the distance. Whoa, that's way too big. All right, let's do it again. That's better. That's probably a little, not quite big enough. Let's try it again. If I'd used units, if I'd set this up so I knew how big the thing was, that would make it a little easier. And it looks like I offset out with the rounded option on, which actually was a happy accident because I think that actually worked okay. So let's go ahead and use that. Wasn't what I was originally thinking I was going to do, but hey, winning is winning, right? So it's a little bit fat now, so I'm going to scale it in. Right there. And then it looks like we've got a couple of little clearance issues here that we need to deal with. So let's go to the front view and let's dig that out. Just use center snap like that. And this object is closed already, so I don't want to trim it and open it back up. So I'm going to Wirecut. And what Wirecut does is it's a Boolean operation, and it goes right through the model, but it also gives you the caps, right? So it doesn't leave an open object, whereas a trim would just open it. So it's basically a Boolean object with a curve instead of an object. So let's clean up the edges on this thing. I want to knock just these sharp edges off here. So let's go down here and blend edges, and I want to blend these off and just make them a little less pointy. And it's a little bit small, so let's make it a little bigger. Too big. There we go. So we can call that done. And we need to put the pin in here because the thing has to be able to rotate. Let's go to wireframe, take a look and see. So that's where our pin is, and it looks like we can infer from this a little bit that there needs to be a little bit of structure up here, so I may just fake something in. So it's kind of, and there isn't anything drawn back here, but I kind of like the idea of there being a little additional structure back here that thing could rotate on. Something like that. And I don't like that you can see that little crescent moon through there, so I'm going to erase that just so it's gone. And I kind of like the attitude of that. Like these lines seem to kind of go together. And I'm going to just extrude with Shift, Cap, and then I can take a look and see, like, do I want it to stick out past that? Have it be like a little secondary step, or do I want it to be in? I kind of like it out like that. That's kind of cool. A little extra detail in there. And so then we can start putting this stuff together. I don't think I'm going to do that just yet. I think I'm going to wait, and I think I may blend the edges off on this thing first before I start sticking it together. The easiest Boolean is just, you know, solid object to solid object, right? If you get into these things like this with no fillets and this with no fillets is the easiest Boolean. But then you have to think about, like, how do you want these two to relate? And so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my fillets on this first. And I also have to decide, like, is this surface there? Is this actually like a piece of billet aluminum or something like that? And I think I'm going to just call that, I think I'm going to call that billet. I'm going to call this like a big billet. So this is like a really strong handle. Maybe it's like something that you can even turn around and grab the end of this thing and use this as a hammer if you had to or something. So we'll tell that story, right? So I'm going to isolate this. Let's just do a blend over the whole thing and something small. It looks like that's going to work everywhere. So let's run it. Bring this back. Let's isolate here. Do the same thing on this. And I think that should work, and it does. If it doesn't, you just change the values until it does. And the reason that the blends wouldn't work would be that you have picked a value that's too big and it can't run around a shape that you're asking it to. So a Boolean knows that worked. And it looks like there's a tiny clearance issue on the front of that thing. So I may grab both of these elements and just drop them a little bit like that. And then let's go ahead and decide how we want to treat some of these edges. And in this case, I think I'm gonna chamfer this one. Not that much. So like that. So let's go ahead and stick these together. And then I may even do a small chamfer on this. And if you want to iterate, you can always preview it to see what the thing is going to look like. Say, yeah, that's too big, so let's go a little smaller. There you go. And run that. And then let's stick these together because I'm imagining these are all going to be kind of a machined piece or cast or something. I don't know. Like that. I'm going to leave those edges sharp for now. In the rendering, we can always address that with edge softening if we have to. So let's look at this down here. And if I Boolean these two objects together, which I kind of want because I feel like this is part of this. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to Boolean these two things together and let them connect. But then I'm also going to extract this piece and join it down here. So now I've got two separate objects, right? I've got that piece up there and this piece down here. So the tank feels like it should be a separate piece. Let's do some blending on this thing. And again, you can always preview this stuff. And I think that could be bigger. I like that. Let's knock this one off. I wouldn't mind that a little bigger. Let's go ahead and do the same down here while we're in the groove. Any questions, by the way? These are intended to be interactive. I should have mentioned that from the beginning. feel free to ask questions in the chat, or if you see something that I'm doing that you don't understand, or is too big or too crazy or doesn't make sense, go ahead and ask, and I'll try to answer as best as I can. All right, so it looks like we're getting pretty close here. I think we've got all of the basics down. So let's address the elephant in the room, which is these tank details. And I'm simply going to split this tank up into a couple of pieces, and I'm going to do that with a curve. And I'm going to just come down here and I'm going to draw my shape. 3 points to make a corner, not 10, just 3. Okay, this is my constant lecture on corners, right? If you have to turn a corner in NURBS, it's 3 points, not 10. If you need a sharper corner, just move the points closer together. If you need a softer corner, just move them farther apart. Okay? Don't make corners like this. Your models will look like garbage. All right? Lighter, 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 lighter. We want lighter stuff. Okay, let's draw the rest of it. Let's come in here. Looks like I missed at the top, so I'm going to fix that later. Again, 1, 2, 3 for corners, not 10, not 50. You'd be amazed some of the things I see come through TAC. Why doesn't my model? Why don't my fillets work? Well, to start with, you've got 2,580 isoparams in a surface that should have 1. All right. And looks like this is bending a little bit, but I think that has to do more with the awfulness of my sketch as opposed to the brilliance of my design. So I think I'm going to stick with this because I know I used shift to place this point right here. So I know that is in line with this guy. And I'm going to tighten this corner up a little bit. Feels like it's a little better with that. All right, so let's just go ahead and simply split this. I'm going to split this object using these 2 curves. And I'm going to actually do a little cheat where I'm going to go to the top view. I'm going to set my gumball, relocate my gumball to the center here. Actually, I'm going to relocate it. Yeah, I'm going to relocate it right to the center. And then I'm going to go to the front view, and I'm going to scale this using shift down a little bit. And then that gives me my offset, right? But you'll notice that the profile is vastly wrong. And there's not really any way to recover that unless I were to untrim this edge and then retrim the object. So that is the world's easiest offset. Now, if I had just grabbed the surface before I scaled it and I had offset it, what would happen? Look what happens if you offset a surface. If I go surface offset, and let's say I offset it in, actually it offset it out, so I need to go the other direction. You can see that the structure of this surface, and it's not bad here, but see how light this surface is, and see how we've picked up a lot more points. If this surface was complex, it would be a lot more pronounced. Whereas this, where we did the scale trim, the surface is still has the original topology that we started with. So that's my favorite way to do this. So I'm going to copy paste. I'm going to scale in just a little bit. I'm going to delete the exterior surface because I don't need it. And then I'm going to untrim this edge, and it's a poly surface, so I have to explode it. That's why it's misbehaving. untrim, and then I'm going to retrim using this curve. And then I get really nice little offsets that I can work with. Now, the only downside of this is I didn't give myself any place for a blend to go. So if I were to try and blend these two surfaces together, right, I could just loft here, but then I'd have to fill it, and who has time for that? So let's do this. I'm going to just bring this curve over a little bit like that. And I'm going to bring this curve down a little bit. I'm going to have to adjust the bottom on that one because it returns on itself. But let's trim this. Now I've got room for a blend to go in there. And this one I'm going to have to scale just a bit. And I'm going to scale it from here like that. Now I'm going to trim. And I've given myself room. Now, is this technically correct? Well, it depends on what you define technically as. But if I'm looking at numbers, no. But like I said, I'm an artist and a designer. I'm not an engineer. I'm looking for the look and the feel and how things work. And I prefer the feel of this better than doing a mechanical offset. You can do mechanical offset. There is an offset tool here. And if you want to do that, knock yourself out. I don't have any problem with that. And I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying what I'm doing is right. I'm just saying this is how I like to roll. So let's use a blend surface again, which I can never find in the map. Why can I not find it? It's in my hotkeys, so I'm going to just steal it from here. No, it's not. Where are you? There it is. And I'm going to blend between these two edges. I don't know why I have such a defect when it comes to finding stuff on the Mac, but I do. And this is set up the curvature, which is way too much for this. I'm just going to go tangent. And I'm going to just increase this just a hair. So that's a little roundier. And we're just going to take a look at the isoparams on this, and they look like they're flowing really nicely. So I'm not even going to bother putting additional shapes in here. I'm going to just say, okay. And then I'm going to do the same thing down here. Hit the space bar to get the last tool. And in this case, it looks like I've got a little isoparam car crash down here. So I'm going to add a couple of additional shapes just to help it find its way around this corner. See how that helps straighten it out? Sometimes needs a little guidance, but don't we all? I'm going to let that one run. Grab everything, join it back up. Let's see what we got. Now I pulled this away a little bit, and I can simply adjust that by Shift Command clicking on this, and I can either drag this, and let's see, it should adjust. And if it messes a whole bunch of stuff up, we can deal with it later, but it looks like it actually adjusted okay. I don't like how it did this little tangent break right here, so I'm actually going to undo that, and I'm going to split. Actually, let's extend this surface. I'm going to extract this for right now because it won't do it if it's a poly surface. And let's extend the surface and see what that buys us. That worked. I'm okay with that. This may be a little big, but I'm not going to go crazy about it. I can always cheat. Watch this. Here's a cheat for you. I'm going to grab the entire thing. Let's set the gumball to the center of this. And then I'm going to just scale the entire thing down so I get the relationship I want. Shh, don't tell. It's not lazy, it's efficiency. That's what I tell my wife all the time. She says, no, it's lazy. All right, I want to line that up so it's the way I want it. Join this guy back to where it needs to be. And then the last thing, the only thing that we need to do is just apply a few materials to this thing. And looks like we've got some detailing to do on the base. So let's do that. And what's a clever way to do this? Let's do this with, oh, I know. Let's do this with a single surface with just 4 points, like that. Let's go to the front view. And let's take this. Let's turn the points on for this. See how clever we can be here. Now, the goal is I don't want to do any additional trimming. I don't want to have to like trim and blend and do all that nonsense. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the degree on this surface, and I'm going to change it to 3, which is going to give me, let's change degree in both directions, 3 and 3, which is going to give me more points, which means I might even need more than that. So let's change degree again, and let's do it like degree 6 and 6, because that's going to give me a lot more points. Now what I can do is I can grab all of these and watch this. He says, hoping it's going to be impressive, with no idea whether it's actually going to work. There we go. So I can pull this little pocket out of this thing, and I can sharpen this up just by simply pulling these guys up like that. So I made myself a little pocket, and then what I can do is use this to design what my little intake is going to be like that. And then maybe the whole thing is a little bit big, so let's scale it a little bit. And as long as it intersects with the whole thing, we're going to get a lot of detail for free. And I could sharpen this up. In fact, let's do so. If I grab this row, this row, and I move them out a little bit, see how I can sharpen that up? See what I was talking about with the points? If you want sharper, you get them closer together. If you want them softer, you pull them farther apart. So I've got enough points where I can sculpt this pocket to kind of have a cool shape, right? And I can even, you know, if I wanted to drop this, I could change the shape of that, but I'm not going to worry about it. And then we've got this cool little pocket shape. And then if I go to the bottom view, and it looks like it's a little deep. I don't want it quite that deep. Let's go about there. And then I transform array, polar, around 0, because I built it on the origin. And let's do, I don't know, let's do 9 of these. Like that. And as long as the normals are pointing out, which I will check with the dir command, which looks like they're pointing in, actually that's the right direction. I should be able to Boolean these out. So if I do a Boolean subtract, or difference, from this, using all of these guys, it should work. And it did. Hooray. But look at how cool that little detail is now, right? So we were able to sculpt that and make it actually, you know, look kind of cool. And then let's just throw a little blend on that, and I think we're about done. So I'm going to do a really small one, and I'm going to chain the edges on these guys. And let's test one to see how it looks. I think that works just fine. So let's go ahead and do it again. We'll just hit the space bar. Chain edges. Every so once in a while with revolved objects, if you get something that's close to the seam, it'll cause a problem, but I'm not going to worry too much about it. The other thing about doing this, because we used a single surface to make this pocket, the chances of this working are much higher because the complexity of the geometry that intersected is really low. And it looks like that's going to work just fine. Any questions so far? Anything that you've seen that you're like, whoa, that's crazy? All right, so let's hide our image. We're done with it. And then let's throw a few materials on this just so that we can see what's going on. And I think we'll be about done. This is the end of the modeling portion, by the way, so if you're not interested in seeing the presentation stuff, you can take off if you'd like, or if you want to see how this ends, please stick around. We're probably 5-10 minutes tops from being done. So let's go to our materials. I'm going to make a couple of materials. I'm going to make a paint. It's a fire extinguisher, so why wouldn't we make it red? My color picker's on the other screen. My color picker's hidden somewhere. I've got 2 monitors going, so. Come on, where are you? Where is my color picker hiding? There it is. It was hiding behind another window on the other screen. I knew it was in there. All right, so let's just make this red. We can also use the color wheel to make things easy. Link. There we go. Drag this onto that. And then I'm going to do some sub-object selection because I'm going to add a little graphic to this thing. So let's do another paint. Let's do that one as white. I'm going to shift command click this surface, click this material, and then assign to object. Nope. Shift command click. There we go. There we go. Sub-object selection. Shift command drag to get the whole bottom thing down here. Make a new one. We'll make a plastic because it's supposed to be like a rubber cap of some sort. Let's make this black-ish. And we're going to leave the reflectivity high, but we're going to make the reflectivity polish low, and that will give us a matte finish that connects, that catches some light. So let's pick this. This Mac is old enough that it's just starting to struggle a bit. I'm going to use the same material here. And then the rest of this stuff is almost all going to be aluminum. So let's make a metal. And I'm going to drop the polish on it. And then I'm going to change just to be, I'll just pick aluminum. And then I'm going to drag select all of this stuff because it's the easy way to go. And then we're going to make another one for glass. And we want it to be clear. I am going to drop it just a hair off of perfectly clear. Assign to this. And then I've got an image that I want to map onto this gauge. So I'm going to extract this surface. Let's isolate it. Go to the front view. And then I'm going to make a new material, just a plastic, but I'm going to image map it. So I have to change it to custom because plastic doesn't allow you to map stuff. And I'm going to go down to the color channel. And I'm going to go to my desktop where my image is. And we're going to assign that to this object. And we need to mess with the mapping. So let's go to the texture mapping. Actually, let's do this with a decal instead. Let's see. You might be able to just mess with this. Let's see. Yeah, I think I want to do this with a decal instead. Let's kill that. Make life easy. I could get into texture mapping, but that's a pain. So let's just take this and let's add a decal to it. If I can find decals on the Mac, that is. There we go. Pick decal. If it's not obvious, I spend most of my time on the PC side. All right, so I'm just going to do this with a decal. Slap it in there. Turn the decal modifier on, and move it around using the nudge keys. A little bit of positioning. We'll call that done. Hide the mapping, bring everything back, and we've got, what do you think? Should this be white too? Up here. Let's see. We can iterate. We go down here and just say assign to object. Yeah, I like that. So let's just undo it, leave it like that. That would give us a place for a logo or a label or anything like that that we wanted. I'm going to just save it. And then this machine, like I said, is fairly old, but let's throw it into ray trace mode and see what we get. I think we'll get something that's workable. And we may want to like map a logo or something onto the front of this, but I think for an hour and 20 minutes done, I think we've got a fairly convincing little product here. And our glass is obviously too dark, so let's fix that. There we go. Glass is really sensitive to how dark you want to make stuff. So this machine, you can see it's like 6, 7, 8. It's going pretty slow, but you can see as it starts to develop. While we're waiting for the paint to dry here, any questions? Any questions on anything you saw? Maybe this would look good with a gradient. Maybe this should be black. Of course, every time I do this, it resets. Let's swap these. Let's make this black. Let's make this white. This feels a little bit more studio-ish if it looks like that. There we go. That looks a little better. No lighting in this model at all. This is just the environment. We might even want to look at if we go back here to the properties, if we go to the camera, I may make this 35 millimeters just to give it a little bit of forced perspective. And maybe we do something a little more artistic with the view, something like that. And let that guy run. All right, any questions so far? Can we get a recording? Yes. So is Skylight turned on when you render? Yes. If I go to my render panel here, you can see that the only thing that's on in this is Skylight. No sun. I'm using the default studio lighting and the default studio for environment. I'm using a gradient for background, and that's it. Nothing else in this scene. The recording is going to be on our YouTube channel. Let me grab that for you. It lives here. What does the noise mean when you're on ray tracing? It's if you look down in this bottom corner, this will go to 1,000 samples. Right now we're only at 28 samples. Each time it samples, it reduces noise. Now, one of the cool things about V7, if you have a little bit of a punky machine like I do here, there are denoisers, which means that that it uses an AI algorithm to go through and actually analyze the noise and remove it. So at about 20 samples, the denoise kicks in, and it'll actually get rid of all that noise. It's amazing. If you haven't seen them yet, if you own V6, please grab V7. We are in beta right now, which means we are turning the corner and getting closer to release. So please start using 7 on the whip, or the beta, I mean, and let us know what you think. The more people we can get testing it and using it and giving us feedback, the faster we can get it out on the market. Interface the same from 6 to 7? Yes, except for 7 has sub-Ds, so that's a whole new ball of wax. The rendering stuff is vastly improved for 7. We've got light fall offs, we've got denoisers. The denoisers are incredible. I've taken renderings on my big machine that have taken 15, 20 minutes. I've run the same renders in about 17 or 18 seconds because the denoisers kick in and you don't need to run the rest of the render. The only reason the render has to keep running is to reduce the noise. So when the denoisers kick in, it's over. So renderings that took hours on old machines are taking minutes. This thing is going to run, probably on this machine, it would take 15 minutes to run this rendering. If we had denoisers kicking in, the denoisers would have already finished this and we would be done under a minute. Is that with Skylight on during ray trace? Yes. Skylight is on. No other lights in the scene, just Skylight and the environment. Any other questions? So to recap, while we're waiting for this to res up, and by all means, we're done now. So if you're got something to do, this is where you can exit. You won't hurt my feelings much. But so to cover what we've done here, right? We kind of analyzed what we were doing. We talked about the difference between designing something and tracing something. I encourage you to make your decisions in 3D as opposed to being a slave to the sketch. We talked about blending surfaces. We talked about tricks for offsetting stuff without getting really crazy, increases in surface density. And then that little pocket, that has a lot of applications to it. So what's the advantage of Wirecut over Boolean? Wirecut is actually a Boolean operation, but instead of using a surface, it just uses a curve. So in order to do a Boolean, like when we did the Wirecut up here on the handle, I would have had to draw the curve, extrude the object, Boolean the object, and then either let the Boolean delete the input object or delete the input object myself. Wirecut lets you just use a curve. So it's a little faster version of Boolean, but it is a Boolean operation. Behind the scenes, what it actually is doing is extruding the curve into an object, rectifying the normals, doing the Boolean, deleting the surface, and returning you to the curve, but it just does it all behind the scenes. Okay, we do these about once a month. If you like this one, come back. If you hated it, email me and let me know what you hated about it so I can stop doing it. But if you like it, email Bob and tell him to give me a raise. No, Bob's awesome, by the way. If you guys have never met Bob, Bob is like one of the coolest people alive. So we're very, very lucky to have him running the show here. He's an awesome dude. Any other questions? All righty. With that, I'll let you go. We're about 157 samples. This is going to run to 1,000, so I'm going to cut it off now so that you don't have to sit and watch paint dry. All righty. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm Kyle Houchins. This is Getting Started Rhino for Mac version 6. Go make great stuff.